recording? Hello, it's Black Jester Matters, blackjester.com, blackjestermatters.com, and all the affiliate things, the Black Jester and Gab and stuff like that. I am going to do episode 8, and sorry if I feel flush. My hip is just being injured, but it seems weird. Like I dislocated my knee while I was sleeping. It's weird. I mean, I won't go as pretty bad as it is, but it's police brutality. I know, it's weird. You do. Yeah, it's, I'm actually familiar with police brutality, oddly enough. Well, you know, when libertarians tend to speak out against that sort of thing generally, but I don't know how many of you have actually been across it. Some of them had, you know, bad, you know, random check situation and stuff, and that's bad too. Random checks are just terrible. Random checks are horrible, evil, degenerate, and right now someone's fighting a marijuana breathalyzer law because I don't know if it was a random check or not. I'm not going to get into the details of reading an article like it's, because I'll just get in the way of the scheduling here. Well, scheduling. So not like I got a speed issue, or like I got a time situation. But, you know, the recording will only last maybe 21 minutes or something, 22 minutes, okay, in standard episodic periods. So. But anyway, yeah, so there's most laws do operate, and probably should be eliminated, because they operate under a presumption of guilt. Now, if you deal with whether it's a mental health law, when it comes to saying you might be a danger to yourself and others, well, if someone is a threat to somebody else or others, you should prove that they've done something, then you should, to another person, and then you should prove it. Well, yeah, you should prove that they've done something to another person, and then you charge them, and you convince a jury. And the due process comes in, and whether they're insane or not, it doesn't matter. I mean, you give them maybe a check in prison, you give them put them on a pill regimen if you must, but really that's just cruel and disgusting. Let them talk it out, you know, talk therapy, if you can prove it. I mean, this is a very subjective illness, mental illness. I mean, there are probably some physical reasons, like we could have a parasite in us, or we could have a bad reaction to mold. I mean, a lot of people who are found mentally ill are in buildings that are filled with mold. That includes addiction behavior. And people don't look into that sort of thing. Mold, parasites, stuff like that, they all tend to accumulate in similar areas, in mass numbers. They don't look into that enough. And then now let's see, I'm Black Jester, by the way. I mean, you figured that out by now, but hopefully. What we do have a problem with here is that people do presume guilt in laws, and that's the thing. Random checks is a presumption of guilt. Let's see, if someone's swerving on the road, it doesn't matter what they have in their system. They're an asshole on the road, they're dangerous on the road. You get footage legitimately, like the moment you spot them swerving the road, turn on the camera, and then turn on the sirens, and you know, use your body camera. Cops should have body cameras. It's good for their protection and everyone else's. Because you know, when your job is to engage in government force and that's when presumption of guilt is possibly relatively reasonable, because if you're using your authority like that, and you're trusted with that power, you can't exactly be expected to be given trust on your word. I mean, that a lot of problems can come from that. And I mean, it's almost as bad as a bot algorithm on a social network. It's just very dangerous. But you know, Sean King claimed that this black woman was raped by a guy, and you could just go to the place where the body cam is. You know, you look it up, and it turned out he was a fucking liar. He was a fucking liar. He didn't touch her. He spent hours going through grueling paperwork and itemizing shit and all that stuff. He did his job. Now, whether he should have pulled her over or not, that's a whole other story, but that should have been more of an issue than anything else. But, no, he decided to go with the shock thing, and I'm sure a lot of people still believe that rape happened, because they didn't go and look at the body camera. But, it's cool that you can do that, and cops should really want this sort of thing, you know. They shouldn't be able to turn it off on their own and stuff like that. It should be recorded permanently, and, you know, gone through another, and uploaded through another branch of government, possibly, like the legal branch. Now, so even if you go down to bylaws and licenses, like Vancouver and other cities, I'm sure, have something called the Property Use and Maintenance Bylaw. Now, this bylaw is a violation of presumption of innocence. It's a cash cow, and it prevents people from renovating and building affordable housing that they want, because it creates huge cost overruns. I mean, just getting the permits, and on top of that, if you need to renovate a building and stuff like that, it just costs per room. It costs per room, and even if it was like $100 per room, could be a lot if you're renovating a 100-unit building. I mean, especially if you don't want the rent to be above $300 or something like that, or whatever. I mean, market price exists because it costs so much to build, and not so much to build necessarily with a construction function, but just the government. Listen, if you're gonna presume innocence, and if you want good things to happen, why don't you just presume the people building and the architect want to do a good job, that they went through the schooling and they got everything done, and you know they have the credentials, and then hell, we don't even need licenses for architects. What we should do is just tell the universities and stuff. Let's say if they fail really badly, you make them regain their degree. You know, and just see that. I mean, it's a lot less paperwork than just having all these institutions, you know, or hairdresser organizations and stuff like that, telling people they can't hairdress for a living because they don't have a license with this quango. Which, that's what they are. They're quangos. They're not licensed. The licensing boards are quangos, and they're still part of the government. They try to say, well, it's not quite the government, but it is still part of the government. Usually when it's something that's part of the government that's sort of partially not government, so I guess it could even be a public company, it could be called a quango, but you know, largely government sort of will have them appoint their friends, or politicians will have friends that want an appointment, and because they have a certain connection, or they need corporate welfare, or they need or they feel they require corporate welfare and stuff like that, or they require a little special interest money, or just recognition as a licensing board, and they might want to hire a buddy of a guy who's elected, and that's usually what happens. Like Canada right now wants to have a study on extreme right-wing politics. Why not having a study on extreme left-wing politics? But I guess that would hurt Trudeau, because he'd be the focal point of that. Extreme is extreme. They're authoritarians. We want to study it. Look up authoritarians. Look up Nazi Germany. Look up Soviet Russia. Look up Venezuela. Look up Mao Zedong and China right now with its social credit thing. And that's another thing. You know, you could ban immigration from China right now, because really only people who are allowed to leave, other than the tourists who don't get arrested, are the people with a high social credit level, which means that they're very loyal Communist Party members. Now, do you really want that? No. I mean, the moment they come across, they end up getting stuck, given those benefit of the doubts and stuff. But that's it. And here's another thing in law. Okay, this is another. So if you build a building, we trust that everything will go right because everyone has their credentials and so on. You hire the best people you can in the private sector, and you don't need central planning authorities. You don't need a planning department in the city hall. You don't need any of that. But you just need to trust the people who have an interest in selling and renting and stuff like that to do the right thing because they don't want the building to fall over. And if the building does fall over and does hurt people, the people responsible are found out, they're proven guilty in a court of law, and they're punished. That's simple. That's how it should be done. And there should probably not be much of a civil system, actually. Really, it should just really be, you prove the guy guilty beyond a reasonable doubt or not. And if they are, they go to jail, or I guess under certain minimal situations, they could be indentured for something. If it's like, they owe $100 and they don't have $100 on them or something like that. So there's that, and then let's see. We'll get there are other problems with things like in the United States, when you get out of jail, after you do a full sentence. I'm not saying parolees. Some guy in New York. I oddly enough agree with a lot of what this guy from the New York Black Lives Matter said on Candace, but not all of it. Candace Owens. But it was an interesting discussion, but it's kind of unusual because you think it would be completely diametrically opposed. I have a problem with the fact that it's just identity-based and identity-driven and stuff like that, and he should be with the Libertarian Party. I mean, you should look at it from the perspective of all police brutality is police brutality, and it sucks. All abuse by cops and authorities suck. And big government, the larger the government gets, the more prejudices it manages to accumulate, and the more hate it manages to accumulate, because it's scared to die and not survive. So it has to pull the dog whistles and ring the bells, and scare everybody. Black people are going to rape your women and stuff like that. That's what it's going to do. So you shrink government. You kill the systematic racism. Big government is what creates systematic racism. I'm not going to doubt there's some sort of systematic racism, but it's big government that creates it. It's this huge, giant government. I mean, HUD is practically creating reservations for black guys. I mean, there's more than black guys there, but let's face it. I mean, that's what it was created for. I mean, now poverty is like spreading around, and people are going to the city from Kentucky and stuff like that. So that's sort of thing it got integrated eventually. But I mean, it's still bad. I mean, it's still imposing this sort of life with huge demoralization. I'm sure there's lots of mold and parasites and all that stuff around there. And the parasites in the state decide to make that even more possible. So the HUD is an evil thing, and I don't even know why it's still around. I mean, you think Carson would have pushed Trump a little hard to get his job eliminated? I mean, that would have been very magnanimous of him. Same with it's funny, the education department in the States, it's run by someone who wanted the education department to end, but now she's got the job, so, we don't need the states to open up voucher programs and stuff like that. We can just handle it from here now. So it's something, the moment they get their claws in the job, just like Mrs. Cheney, it suddenly becomes, it's trying not to end it just yet, I mean, there has been omnibus bills to end every federal department that does what the states should be doing. And then we go to Yang, presidential candidate Yang. He's threatening this thing about the big Skynet taking over everyone's job. And, as it might be true for a certain period of time, it is shown in the past with the Ford company and stuff like that, unless there are government bailouts and corporate welfare, automation doesn't work out. Automation tends to be a slow, it ends up being a short-term bandage that doesn't work out because the machines don't buy stuff. And the fact is, I have a suspicion that Yang has some sort of investment or some sort of friend who has an investment in robotics, and he wants it to be easier, more comfortable for businesses to buy these robots and these self-driving cars. And I don't think they have a right to self-driving cars because, let's face it, unless you take personal responsibility, like you have to be there to run the machine. Because in the past, we never had this sort of thing. We never had this idea that the car would drive itself. We didn't have the idea that all the machines would run themselves. We always had someone who had to monitor the machines and handle them. Manual overdrive will always be necessary. I mean, you can't possibly run a world without manual overdrive. Things go bad, software goes bad, unless you have manual override. Sorry, overdrive. I'm thinking of that Stephen King case. Yeah, but unless you have manual override, things go haywire. Things will go bad. I mean, you have to be. It is terrible that you have to click on the Start tab to end the Windows. Like, I remember you used to be able to just hit the power button and it would stop. I remember, and you know, speaking of which, if you're angry about computers and your kids watching things and stuff like that, you know what the best guard for parents ever was? It was a keyboard lock. It used to be keyboard locks. Now they don't have keyboard locks. Why? Because they probably don't actually want your kids not to use the computer and see stuff and shit like that. And then here's the thing, censorship comes from that too, because parents are bitching. Oh, my kid is watching that Shapiro, and oh my God, what the hell are we gonna do? And I'm thinking, oh brother, really? You're worried about your kid watching something? Have you ever thought of raising him? Or did you think of raising him? This is the same type of mentality that comes from a person having a newborn child and putting on Twitter, I'm a proud parent. Okay, my father has a son that has never gone to jail for a crime. He's never been convicted. He's never been charged. He has a right to say proud father because, he's over 18, he's 40 years old. 40 years, no jail time. Can you imagine that? And I still got police brutality. Ain't that just a sweet thing, huh? BPD, you're wonderful. And still no apologies on that aspect too. Oddly, it's of course they use the what the police decided to do on the guise of everything else is that they talked to a mental health team, and then they had an in because my aunt went there. And it's sort of like a cult form of mental health services. So, she wanted to feel a little less awed, I guess, and they convinced her, well, you can help him out and stuff like that. And basically what they did is they convinced my aunt to let them in my house, which she had no right to. And this is the Dutch side. And it's a very rather distant, close part. I got less distance with my extended family than with that side of the family. But, so she knew shit all about anything I was going through anyway. But I was trying to work on my comedy career at this point, and then they bust my knee, and then they take me off to a hospital because, if they took me to court like I told them they should, and demanding my liberties on that matter, they would have to explain things like why my knee was busted. They would have to explain why they even came into my house without my permission, or my apartment without my permission, and all that other stuff, right? That was a terrible thing. This happened in 2001, I think. Yeah, 2001. The second time they came at me under the same guise, they showed up very fast. I mean, they showed up like they were waiting around the corner. And they showed up at my cathedral. Holy Rosary Cathedral. I was just praying. I did have a knife there, but it was blunted. It was a Nepalese demon slayer, so I thought it was a nice thing to focus on when you're praying. It was a monotheistic item. It was nothing harmful. I mean, it was like a crucifix and stuff like that. And also, by law, if your handle shows, you can have a blade. So it could be sharp as shit, because someone called it in. They say someone called it in. And they responded instantly. And it was like, I was at the church for less than 10 minutes. I mean, it wouldn't have been noticeable. I claim it's under my hat, so actually if they waited for me to claim that, they probably could have prosecuted me, maybe. Because they already showed up claiming someone saw it. So if someone saw it, it was legal. That's actually true. That's why you can have semi-hidden blades and things like staffs and even a clip. If the clip shows, then that's legal. That's Canadian. That's Canada. God knows why a gun with a holster isn't fucking legal. I mean, like, you'd rather be stabbed? I mean, or hit in the head with a blunt ceremonial dagger that just has some extra cultural history. It was a nice piece. My mother got it for me. It was a gift I got. And they never returned it either. Never returned it. So they stole my property, and they abused me and all that other crap on this false premise. Anyway, this is the whole situation, that's my religion. But I've never committed a crime in my life. I might have jaywalked once, I don't know. It's not the sort of thing, I probably was out of focus when that happened. Yeah, sometimes I stop at a green light, like it's a red light, and it's just something that happens when you're lost in thought. But never committed an act of violence against another person, never defrauded another person, never harmed another person, but they took it upon themselves to interrupt my career building. I was trying to start up if I started it would have been harder to even, things have been rough enough. I mean, I actually do have PTSD now. They decide to take me in on that pretense, and I come out with PTSD. I'm so hyper-vigilant. I'm very hyper-vigilant and stuff like that. So that's the problem. But I'm still not violent. I'm still a pacifist. I mean, when I get on my knee and I feel the pain, I get very angry. And that dulls the pain, oddly enough, so I don't mind it a little bit. But if someone deserved it, I don't know what would happen. but it's probably good if I get attacked ever again. But I don't believe in violence. Non-aggression principle is a nice principle. I think maybe some people take it to an extent that might be a little bit soy boyish too, but it's a great thing. Liberty is a wonderful thing, and we almost disallowed the liberties because, we got police brutality, which causes injuries and stuff like that. We got all sorts of stupid government things that do actually cause injuries, bad surgeries, stuff like that. So, things like disability end up necessary, and it's not even handled well. It's probably the most necessary thing out there, and they don't handle it well. And I think John Horgan in BC, British Columbia, has actually increased, this year has actually he didn't increase the tax deductible allowability, but he increased disability. So now people on disability will probably have to pay tax. And he's never actually told them that. He probably doesn't know because he looks like a big jockey idiot. He looks like the type of guy who beat up people in school and stuff like that. Looks like a real mean fucker. I mean, that's the impression I get. Like a juice monkey or something like that. But not that Pink Shirt Lady was great, because Pink Shirt Lady was she was pushing this collectivist I shouldn't quote collectivist because it's exactly what it is. Collectivist, it becomes a real twitch. Christy Clark was this collectivist woman who pushed this pink shirt thing, and it was like an army of people saying don't bully people. It's like ganging up on people and saying don't bully people. It's like they're all wearing uniforms basically and saying don't bully people. And I'm thinking that was the mentality that got me called a fag in school. I mean, that's where I got my nice nickname, Fag, in school. I mean, this came from not just one guy. I mean, there was one ringleader who was a bit of a bully, but if he didn't have that crowd with him, it wouldn't have happened. It took that collectivism to really galvanize the brutish twit who decided to call me a fag, and I didn't say I was the guy on top. But that's a terrible thing, you know. It's she was a bully. She was shaking the taxpayer for their money by their bootstraps and stuff like that. She was supporting the carbon tax that now is getting put in place now, and at the time even the NDP weren't supporting the carbon tax, and that's just dreadful. They should ban all taxes on individuals. Ban all taxes on individuals. Just focus on collective business activity when it comes to taxation. You can even do a tax on per sales, you know, like not a VAT, not when you buy it, not when you paying for it as an individual when you buy something, but just one flat on a fat costs on per sale items, and you know, a tariff on multinational businesses. You know, with it, why not? And I'm not a terrible isolationist, although I think any country that doesn't match our value system enough, like having a social, social point system, a social credit system, should be probably on the embargo list. I mean, why is there such love to do trade with China? I mean, they're the most polluting, the most abusing of their people, and they're terrible. I mean, Jesus, and it's like, I mean, there's no reason for it. There's no good reason for it. We enable them, and I think they're probably worse than Iran in many situations. I mean, they engage in religious abuses too, from an atheist standpoint, but still, they do enforce it. I mean, they could always decide, okay, we'll become like the old Chinese Republic that we destroyed, but they're not, and that's that. I mean, we don't need to get those Huawei phones out here. No, fuck it. Forget the worrying about that woman who came over here. Send her back. Send her phones back, and that's that. You know, and that's you know, we should be focusing on individuals and individualism. And individuals pay most of the tax, not corporations. Not corporations won't pay any taxes because they write everything off. You know, if individuals didn't pay taxes, an artist wouldn't be paying taxes. You wouldn't really need to send artists funding. You won't. That can go away with all the corporate welfare, because you know that at least they won't be paying taxes and stuff like that. I mean, you know, actors, directors, stuff like that. They'll run their own in-house, their own personal business. Some of them incorporate, but other than that, if they're smart, at this point they probably won't need to incorporate either. So that's that. Accountants will hate it, which would normally be a problem now, because if you, or even it is a little bit, if a candidate finances more than $10,000 to be an MP in Canada, they have to get an accountant to be an auditor. But that's different. There used to be any money at all, or no money. But still puts you at odds, because, you know, if you're in a position where you're going to eliminate accountant jobs, I mean, who's going to audit your papers, right? So it's almost like a plot by the government through the democratic system to see that government reigns supreme. And that's basically